Hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Michal Walkstock. I'm Director of Online Marketing here at Sisense, and I'm thrilled to have everyone join the webinar. Today's webinar about self-serve BI and a billion rows of data is going to be an exciting one. I'm glad you joined. And today we're lucky enough to have two presenters, two of our talented Sisense staff team to present to you. Daniel Klein will be giving the introduction and prep you for the demo, and then Evan will be giving you the demo on the billion rows of data. I just wanted to let everyone know that the webinar is going to be recorded, and I'll send that to you within a day or two of the webinar. And also, you can feel free to ask questions through the chat box at the bottom of your console, and I'll pass those questions over to Daniel and Evan at the end of the presentation. So feel free to send those as they come. I guess that's all. With that, I will pass the mic over to Daniel. Please take it away.
Thank you, McCall. Don't know about talented. Well, Evan's definitely talented. Myself, I'm just rinse and repeat type of guy. But thank you, McCall. Very excited for the demo today. We believe that this is something that is very unique to the market. As you all know, self-service is definitely something that has grown extremely quickly. The idea of putting the power in the business user's hands, and the big data has also been something that has been discussed much over the past few years, but putting them together is obviously a challenge that many companies are starting to see. It's not just the big companies that are seeing big data, it's small companies. All types of different companies are bringing larger sets of data with different types of users who want as much capability as possible. And this is definitely a challenge that I think Sisense solves much better than a lot of the other guys out there, and hopefully you guys get to see that today. So this is our agenda. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the challenges that you see as you look at trying to scale out to larger sets of data, larger sets of users, what type of implications that has on the hardware, your DBAs, the IT team, as well as the business users. From there, I'm going to be talking about a number of different types of solutions that are out there, OLAP, in-memory, all those types of tools, how they handle large sets of data or don't handle large sets of data, and what type, again, implications that has on hardware, has on your team for the long term, and how Sisense actually starts to work with those larger sets of data. Once I've done my piece on that, I'll pass it over to Evan, who will actually walk through building a dashboard off of a 1 billion row data set today. Before we get into that, Sisense, we're a global company. We've grown extremely quickly. I personally joined as the 37th employee August of 2013, so about a year and a half ago. I think we're about 140 strong now. Actually need to update my slide here. We're at about 700 customers, growing extremely quickly. Have had amazing success in many different areas. Obviously, when we bring in some prospects who have larger sets of data, that is an area in which we excel in. I wouldn't say that every prospect that comes to us has a billion rows of data. Actually, typically not. Usually, we're dealing with the millions of rows of data. But they understand that that data size is going to grow and grow quickly. 1 million can turn into 5 million in 1 year, 5 million and 20 million the next year. So knowing that you have a solution that scales nicely, scales efficiently without having to continually invest in hardware, invest time and resources from IT is important, whether or not you're at 1 billion rows today or a year from now. These are a number of the organizations that we work with. So again, from small to big, it's not just about the size of your company. It's about the data that you're bringing in. I'd actually say that probably eBay is the company that most closely represents what we're trying to convey today. They came to us about 3 years ago, evaluated all the tools that were out there. This was before we had they did a proof of concept off of somewhere around 200, 300 million rows of data. It became pretty evident that Sisense really was the only tool that allowed them to have that ease of use while not sacrificing working with those larger sets of data or having to put too much time into consolidating or aggregating the data down. We started off with one project within eBay. We only started within the marketing side. Now they've started to use us in logistics. They started to use us in the finance side. So we start off with one project. Now we're working on about 3 projects with eBay. So a lot of the times we do start in one division. Then they find that our back-end application called the Elasticube allows you to have this one version of the truth. Because of its scalability, you don't have to worry way too much about how much data are we adding to this. Is this something that is going to be able to scale efficiently? Is each business user going to have their own set of data and their own set of ideas around what the data is trying to tell them? Or is it going to be one unified view of the data? And I think that's where we start to come in versus some of the other data discovery tools out there. There's a lot of tools that allow you to build nice dashboards, have that self-service type of capability, but when you're looking to scale out to larger sets of data, again, it gets complicated. So, what type of steps does your organization take to use this big data? Where does it really become useful, and what type of challenges, again, are there when overcoming these different different big data challenges? The hardware that you're going to have to set us up on, or us, or other tools. Again, this is kind of reviewing the challenges. And I would say the biggest thing that I see when I'm looking at the different tools out there, and I'm going to start to review these. These are 3 different types of tools. You have these OLAP solution. So these are tools like Cognos. These are tools like information builders. A lot of these bigger solutions that are out there scale very nicely, actually. You can scale to the terabytes of data. You can scale to the billions of rows of data. But you're looking at setting up large sets of hardware. And you're looking at high IT involvement. For example, let's say that you have a business user that has a pivot table with a certain amount of columns, and you want your business user to take away columns or add columns or maybe drill down into a column. That involves IT having to pre-aggregate that data. So they need to build into the cube, I want to be able to drill down from months to days. That's not a scalable model. That's not a self-service type of model. A user one day may want to drill down from months to days, but maybe the next day they want to drill down from months to, let's say, the salespeople who have sold within that specific month, or the names of the products within that month, or even each individual order ID within that month. For every specific aggregation, every specific type of query that the business user wants to run, IT is going to need to be involved. They need to build that into the cube, rebuild the cube, then redeploy that cube to the users. This is an older stuff, 20 years old. Don't really see new business coming into these tools. It's more of them just kind of collecting renewals at this point. Now, in comes the in-memory solutions about 15 years ago. The way that these solutions work is they bring in all of your data in RAM at runtime. Now, these are stronger in the data discovery space. You can slice and dice the data however you like. It's really up to you. You can do all the drill downs that you'd like. You can filter on any dimension that you like. The problem is that you're limited to the amount of memory that you have within the RAM. So let's say you have a database. I think that the database that we're connecting to is somewhere around 150 gigs or 200 gigs today. Evan will run through that. But you're going to need to make sure that you have a server with that amount of RAM. And then on top of that, as your users grow, for each user you have running the same query, that's about 10% additional load on that RAM. So scaling out to hardware, scaling the users becomes difficult. And what I'll typically see most companies do who are working with these in-memory solutions, instead of scaling out to larger sets of hardware, is they're really leaning on their DBAs or their IT out there, and they are building views. So let's say they'll have a view, all right, I have this view from 2012 to 2014, and then I have a view for just these specific products. And that starts to decentralize your data. You lose that one version of the truth. You start having these one-off views that are for one dashboard or a set of dashboards. You don't have everyone looking at the same set of data. It becomes a nightmare on maintaining where all of your data is and making sure that it's up to date. It is not something that, again, is business user-friendly or IT-friendly. Your business users are going back to IT and asking, I'd like to have a view off of this set of data. And again, it's because you're limited to the amount of memory that you have. Sisense is a little bit different. We have created something called the ElastiCube, and this is patented technology. It is all Sisense technology. We do not leverage a third party for this product, and kind of diving back into the way that an in-memory solution works is you picture your database, okay? You have a certain amount of tables, you have a certain amount of columns within each table that you're bringing in, and let's say you want to run a query, and I'm going to use sales data for an example. You want to run a query off of the amount of revenue that each one of your salespeople has sold over a specific period of time. And you need 3 columns for that query: the salesperson's name, the revenue, and date. Instead of being able to aggregate that data down, the in-memory solutions will bring every single column from your tables in RAM at runtime and process all of that data in RAM at runtime. So imagine if you have a billion rows of data running through every single column in that database, every single row within that database to return the results of a specific query, this one query. It becomes intensive, which is why you start to build those views, or you're investing in a huge data warehouse like a Vertica or an Atiza or Teradata, which are very complicated. It's time-consuming to set up and obviously expensive. Sisense, what we've done is we create a columnar database that is actually stored on disk. Now, disk is very cheap. There's a lot of room on it. And again, we're not storing on RAM. We're storing on disk. And let's say we're running that exact same query, revenue by salesperson over time. Only those 3 columns, the columns necessary for that query, are then brought in RAM at runtime. A lot less data being brought in RAM. From there, we actually leverage the L1, L2, and L3 cache to process the data. So the RAM brings in those columns, passes off bits of the query to the L1, L2, L3 cache. It's processed there, and then everything is then brought back to the RAM and then brought back to disk. We're simply leveraging the modern CPU architecture, the modern machine architecture. We started selling our solution in 2010, which is about 10 years later than these in-memory solutions. Simply newer technology, and this is what allows us to scale to larger sets of data. Bring in all of your data into one place. From there, your business users have control over all the data within this one central version of the truth, which is the ElastiCube. So that's pretty much our architecture. Hopefully at the end of the day, your IT is spending less time building views. You're spending less money on hardware. You don't have to worry about constantly scaling up the amount of hardware that you're using, and you're keeping the power in the business users' hands. They're allowed to make decisions on the spot. They're not having to go back to anyone and wait for a view or wait for something to be pre-aggregated. Everything is built within this ElastiCube. And beyond that, I know that we're focusing on large sets of data. If you have seen those data visualization tools out there, you can know that scaling out to many tables or many views can get complicated. We have this nice drag and drop environment that allows you to start bringing in many tables. I've seen ElastiCubes with hundreds of tables where you are simply joining on those primary and foreign keys. It's a really nice back-end application that allows you to bring in tables as your organization grows. All right, so that is my piece. From here, I would like to pass it off to Evan, who's going to get to the good stuff. I do the talking, he does the showing.
Great, thanks, Daniel. So can you just pass maybe the screen sharing to me, and then we can get started. Thanks. So just like to reiterate, what we're going to be doing today is, as Daniel said, there are those solutions that are, so pause my screen for a second, there are those solutions that are able to deal with, enterprise level deployments where are very technical, you need a lot of infrastructure in place, and there's those solutions that are more agile and, can make it easy for business users to analyze data on their own terms when they need to. What we're going to show you in this demo is how we can provide both a flexible solution, one that enables you to work with a large data set and an end user to work with a large data set. And what I'm going to do is show you a little bit about the machine specifications, talk a little bit about the ElastiCube, and then walk through actually going and doing a demo. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so you should now be all being able to see, this is just the machine setup where we have over here, this is an Amazon machine that we set it up on. You can see the CPU, we've got 32 cores, roughly about 128 gigabytes of RAM on this machine. You can see we're using roughly half of that. So this is the machine setup. Obviously it's different and it depends on each data source that you're using. And what we'll look at is over here we have the ElastiCube server, so we can see that this cube is roughly 170 gigabytes of data that's running on the machine, and we're going to use this for our analysis. Okay, so we can just open up the ElastiCube Manager to see the table. So we can see this table has, we're going to dig into it and show it's got a billion rows, but you can see there's many columns and a lot of data on this. And this is what we're going to be using for today's demo. So the actual design environment is web-based. Over here you can see the web environment. It's on a local machine, so you can see it says local over here. And we're going to start working with the data. So the first thing we can do is I'm just going to select the data, and we can see all the available fields within that table that I showed you earlier. And we're going to do a complex calculation. So we're going to do a unique count, which actually counts each different individual value. Instead of count all, to show you that there are already a billion records over here. And what this is the hit ID is just a unique identifier for somebody on a website. And if we do a unique count, we'll see there's a billion rows. It's just an abbreviation, but I'll show you the actual figure. So if we just take off the abbreviated values, it's just a setting in Sisense, we can see we've got over a billion rows, so roughly 1,250,000 records. So it's a large data set that we're working. And again, this is a heavy calculation. And what we're going to do is to continue to actually add a new widget over here. So I can add a different calculation. In this case, I'm going to take a categorical data. So over here we've got the age range. And I'm going to combine that with another field over here, a different calculation. In this case, we can use just a sum, a total of revenue. And we can see all the different records. So we've got large tens of millions of rows here. We can choose to visualize the data how we want, and then to just create the widget. So you can see now, again, two visualizations. These are, again, going over billions of rows of records, two different queries that are being visualized here. We're going to continue to work. So let's take another example over here. We can select the data and go to the date. We can see we've got different time settings and calculations. In this case, we're going to take months and see that there's quite a few years of data here ranging from 2009 to 2011. And again, we're going to do another complex, quite a heavy calculation on this. So over here, we can go back to the hit ID, and we can do a unique count of that. Okay, so this is a complex calculation over time, and we can see how that's progressing. Again, this is a web environment. You can see I'm not doing any coding or scripting, and you can see over here we've got 50 million rows per month of data that's being calculated, and we can add that to our dashboard. And we can do one last widget here, just so that we've got quite a few, and again, these queries are each going over those billion row data set. In this case, we're going to look at revenue again, and simply segment that by another field. In this case, we can do a numeric field where we can do the day of the week. And we'll see once that's in, we can take all the items. We're going to just turn that into a nice column chart. And we can see again, this data is visualizing very easily. We have a large, the majority is on a Monday, on day one, and then we can go forward. And another thing that you want to do, obviously, is be able to filter data. You don't always want to be able to work with a large data set. So we're going to add some filters to it to segment the data. So over here we can filter and choose a specific year filter, and just choose 2012 in the dates and add that in over there. Okay. Again, you can see all the widgets are updating based on that. We can interact with the widgets, select a specific age range, so it creates a filter, select a time period, okay, and also be able to dig into the data. So if I wanted, let's say, after that's visualized, go into it and drill into a specific segment, I can do that, be able to go into, let's say, the age range and get that actually visualized. Let's take a second. Okay, great. So again, it creates a flexible environment. You can see this is a lot of data that we're working with, a lot of different filters, a lot of different visualizations that we're using over here. It's not something that's easy to do, It's complex, but with the right environment, Sisense definitely supports this and enables you to analyze a very big data set in a very easy and quick way and provide something that's agile to end users. If we just want to make a quick look maybe on the resource utilization over here, you can see we're only touching roughly 10% of the CPU and half of the memory, so it's not like we've just loaded everything into memory. It is an efficient architecture on how to actually work with the data and that environment. So this is an example that we just thought would be good to show you and step you through how we can easily visualize 1 billion rows of data in using Sisense. I'm just going to stop at that point and hand over back to Daniel to just summarize today's discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Evan. So again, I really want to focus on one thing that Evan walked through during the demo, and that was the data discovery piece. So as you saw, it wasn't like it was just a dashboard where he was building a few widgets off of that big database, even though that's impressive on its own. Even if it's not interactive, to have a large data set be built from scratch off of a data magnitude of that size is impressive. But then from there to drill down, to filter, to continue to dig deeper into the data, that's what a Sisense solution is going to allow you to do compared to maybe the in-memory, the OLAP solutions, is really that self-service data discovery for the business user. That is kind of the Sisense, that's our mission. Our mission is as your data grows, as your user needs grow, you're not having to invest a ton of time or a ton of hardware on making sure that you're still getting a lot of value out of your data. It's not just about the high-level information. It's also about making sure that you can work with large sets and getting down to the granular information. So that would be kind of my takeaway from what Evan showed today and working with those larger sets of data.
Great, Daniel. Could you just accept the presenter rights?
It's fine. I've taken it. It's okay.
Okay, fine, great.
Sorry about that.
So we have a few questions that have already come in. Thank you guys both for your presentation. I'm glad to see it sparked interest. One of the first questions we have are, what are the ways to load data into Elasticube and how is the throughput?
Okay, great. So each Elasticube, actually, there's various connectors that are native that you can connect to the data from, relational databases like SQL. Typically, what you would need is just the IP location and login credentials. And then there's various synchronization settings on how to do that. So you would initially load the data in, and then you can have incremental builds. So you don't have to build from scratch based on a particular frequency of data. To keep that data up to date and in sync with the Elasticube. There's also obviously different data sources. So you can use web-based data sources like Google Analytics or Salesforce and mash that up in. MongoDB, we connect to Hive and various flat files. So you can really create a rich data environment. For each individual data source or table, you can set how you want it to be synchronized and on what basis. And so it does have to be important to Elasticube, and then you can do incremental synchronizations to keep it up to date.
Great, thanks. Another question just came in. Do you support clustering or high availability?
So yeah, we do have high availability options that you can deploy that we've done for clients. That's something that we definitely can set up for you. We don't have clustering at the moment, but it is something that we're looking into on our product roadmap, but there's no date for that as of yet.
Okay, here's another one.
Evan, the product manager with no guarantees.
Here's another one. I understand that Sisense is based on a columnar database. Can you get into more detail on how that impacts big data?
Sure. So that was one of the points I think both myself and Daniel spoke about, that we have the ability to only load into RAM that data that's needed when the queries run. So the advantage of Columnar is twofold. Firstly, we store the data on disk on a particular server, and only when a query is run, we take the individual columns that are needed and load that into RAM to get the result set. What that means is that we break essentially big data into parts and only query it when it's needed, and that gives us the boost to make things more efficient.
And one thing that I'd also like to touch on there, this isn't something that I covered during the webinar. but we have something called a crowd-accelerated analytics, and what that is an intelligent caching mechanism, whereas most tools, they store an entire query at the top of the cache. Sisense, if you think of it like Tetris, will store bits of a query. For example, if you have 100 users simultaneously using the application, that's going to be a large load typically on a machine. But if most of them are running a query for a specific year or a specific month or a specific product, and store just bits of those queries at the top of the cache, and then it starts to mix and mash those different queries together. So instead of becoming slower with the more users, it actually will become faster. It becomes more intelligent. It has the ability to understand what bits of each query are being run most often and then put those together.
Great, thanks for that,
So
Daniel.
it doesn't have too much to do with the Columnar database, but definitely great when you're looking to scale out to a larger user set.
Okay, another question came in. What are the different products, only server version?
Maybe that's a question, if I understand right, about the architecture. There's two main parts of Sisense. There's the Elasticube server, which is the data engine, and then Sisense Web, which is for visualizing and analyzing the data. Typically, it is an end-to-end solution that we provide, with the questions really being around the volume of data that you need. So those are the two main components: the data engine and the Sisense Web. And the real question is how much data you need for your organization to determine the correct package for big data or for other data sets.
Okay, and a follow-up to that question: can we export reports into CSV and Excel?
Great question. Yes, you can. Any table widget or something that you set up in as a visualization on the front end, you can export to CSV. There's a quick option to do that. There's also a API to access the data that sits in the Elasticube and use it for third-party applications. So those are definitely parts of the system. And we also have plugins that you can export data from an Elasticube directly onto a CSV after it's been updated.
Okay, maybe we have time for one more question. What is the typical size of data used by your customers?
Also a good question. Again, as Daniel said, it really can depend. Some of our customers are looking at, just a few million rows. Some are working with, tens of millions or hundreds of millions. I don't think there is a specific number. I think the thing is that, it's a combination of complex, varied, and big data. Or large data sets that organizations use Sisense, and for that, the Elasticube being able to easily mix and match different sources in a visual environment is very useful, and also being able to support large data sets and make it quick for a self-service environment.
Great. As I don't have the closing slide up, but we have a free trial that's available on the site at sisense.com that you can try on any data size. And if anyone is interested in doing a proof of concept or a one-on-one demo, you can just put that in the chat box, and I will have someone follow up with you immediately. And if that is all, I guess I will say thank you for attending, and we will send the I do. I see some new other questions coming in. Do you want to take those or answer them offline?
I'll tell you what, I'll answer a few of the questions that just came in now. And then obviously we will respond to all of your questions. We'll get someone to reach out to you, but give me a moment and I'll take a look at them.
Okay, so yeah, there are a few other questions that came in. Thanks for asking. Can you add info about your modeling, many-to-many allocations, and so on?
Yeah, great question. So we can deal with, the Sisense environment connects to the raw data, and you can use it for a modeling environment in the Elasticube. There's two models you can drag and drop to create inner joins between different data sources with just, as I said, just a simple join operation. You can also run your own SQL, so you can get a custom table, and within that write other kinds of joins or complex data to mash up different data sets. Even if it's data from MongoDB and Hive and SQL, you can use that with write SQL on top of all of that, and you can use that to deal with many-to-many relationships and break them down as you would for other environments. And we've got lots of tips and help with that as well.
Okay, another one. What are the different types of security Sisense provides?
Okay, so we have a complete security environment. I'll go through some of the main features. Firstly, a single dashboard can be set up to be viewed to present different data to different users on a row-based level rule. So you might have data from different countries and determine that one viewer will only see North America, where another viewer will view data within Europe, so you can split that. You can also choose what dashboard you share with who and under what conditions, so whether they can actually edit the dashboard or if they can simply view it. We provide support for single sign-on, Active Directory, and those kind of environments as well. And for different security settings, as we are based on the server, we can actually take the security arrangement and architecture you have on the server and make sure that's extended to Sisense as well. Okay, I think there was another question around examples of CPU RAM combinations, and again, typically when we're starting to work with with large data sets, let's say hundreds of millions of rows with multiple users, we are going to be looking at a machine of at least 125 gigs of RAM and 16 cores. But again, that's something that we tend to evaluate for each circumstance, and we can provide exact figures for you based on doing analysis of your data environment.
Great, thanks for that. Some people are putting in the chat box different ways that they want us to follow up with them, which is a great idea. So if someone would like pricing information or a demo or a free trial, you can feel free to put that in the chat box and I'll make sure someone follows up. And if there's any specific pricing or purchasing questions, we're going to answer that offline. So I think we're good. Any other questions? I'll leave the chat box open for a little while. You guys can put them in. And thanks so much for joining us.